Good morning, everyone. My name is Shailja Thakur. I am working as assistant professor at Maharaja Agrasen School of Management, Maharaja Agrasen University. The topic for the discussion today is demand theory. Just desiring or wanting things is not enough to create a demand. Suppose a mill worker desires or wants to have a car but does not have the necessary means to buy it. This desire is ineffective and will not become a demand. Similarly, a miser may desire to have the car, has means to purchase it but will not spend the money. His desire would also not constitute a demand. Thus, we define demand for a commodity or service as an effective desire backed by means as well as willingness to pay for it. The demand arises out of the following three things. First, desire or want of the commodity. Second is the ability to pay. And the third one is willingness to pay. Only when all these three things are present, then the consumer presents his demand in the market. So now we will see the definition of demand. Demand for a commodity is the quantity which a consumer is willing to buy at a particular price at a particular time. Or we can say the demand for anything at a given price is the amount of it which will be bought per unit of time at that price. Another definition is by demand we mean the quantity of a commodity that will be purchased at a particular price and not merely the desire of a thing. Now, next topic is demand schedule. The demand schedule in the table represents different quantities of commodities that are purchased at different prices during a certain specified period. Demand schedule is classified into two types. First is individual demand schedule and the second is market demand schedule. Individual demand schedule is the demand of an individual for a commodity at different prices at a particular time period. As we can see in the example, their price of oranges is given and at the other side quantity of oranges of an individual consumer is given. Next is market demand schedule. Market demand schedule is defined as the quantities of a given commodity which all consumers will buy at all possible prices at given moment of time. This is an example of market demand schedule. You can see price of milk at one side, demand of Mr. X at the other side and demand of Mr. Y after that. Market demand can be calculated by adding the demand of individual consumers. As we can see, 1 plus 2 is equal to 3 in the first case. When the price decreases to 4, the market demand increases to 5. That is 2 plus 3 and so on. Then comes demand curves. The demand curve is a graphic statement or presentation of the relationship between product price and the quantity of the product demanded. It is drawn with price on the vertical axis of the graph and quantity demanded on the horizontal axis. It only tells us how much quantity of goods would be purchased by the consumer at various possible prices. As demand schedule is of two types, individual and market, similarly, demand curve is also of two types, individual demand curve and market demand curve. So, individual demand curve is a graphical presentation of the quantities of a commodity that an individual or a particular customer will buy at a given time at different prices. This is the individual demand curve on the right side. Market demand curve. A market demand curve is a graphical presentation of quantities of a commodity which all the buyers in the market stand ready to take off at all possible prices at a given moment of time. Next comes law of demand. The law of demand states that other factors being constant, price and quantity demanded of a commodity or service are inversely related to each other. That is, when the price of a product increases, the demand for the same product will decrease. Description of the law. Law of demand explains consumers' choice behavior when the price changes. In the market, assuming all other factors affecting demand being constant, when the price of goods increases, it leads to decrease in the demand of that commodity. This is the natural consumer choice behavior. This happens because the consumer hesitates to spend more for the good with the fear of going out of cash. There are certain assumptions of this law. First, habits, tastes, and fashions remain constant. Money, income of the consumer does not change. Prices of other goods remain constant. Commodity in question has no substitute. Commodity is a normal good and has no prestige or status value. People do not expect changes in the prices. This is the explanation. In this we can see an individual demand schedule. At one side the price of oranges is given and the other side the quantity of oranges is given. So when the price of oranges is 15 per unit, a consumer purchases 2 kgs of oranges. When the price falls to 12, he purchases 3 kgs of oranges. Similarly, when the price further falls, the quantity demanded by him goes on rising until at price 3. The quantity demanded by him rises to 6 kgs of oranges. The above table depicts an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded as the price of the oranges goes on falling. Its demand goes on increasing. This is the graphical presentation of law of demand. We can now plot the data from table on a graph with the price on the vertical axis and quantity on the horizontal axis. The graph depicts that when price of oranges is 15 per unit, a consumer purchases 2 kgs of oranges. When the price falls to 12, he purchases 3 kgs of oranges. Similarly, when the price further falls, quantity demanded him goes on rising until at price rupees 3, the quantity demanded by him rises to 6 kgs of oranges. The above graph depicts an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded as the price of the oranges goes on falling. Its demand goes on increasing. There are certain exceptions to law of demands. That exceptions means on commodities which law of demand doesn't work. First is given goods. These are those inferior goods on which the consumer spends a large part of his income and the demand for which falls with the fall in their prices. The demand curve for these has a positive slope. The consumers of such goods are mostly the poor. A rise in their price drains their resources and the poor have to shift their consumption from the more expensive goods to the given goods, while a fall in the prices would spare the household some money for more expensive goods, which still remain cheaper. Second exception is articles of distinctions or commodities which are used as status symbols. Some expensive commodities like diamonds, air conditioning, cars, etc. are used as status symbols to display one's health. The more expensive these commodities become, the higher their value as a status symbol and hence the greater demand for them. As their prices go up and become costlier, rich people think it is more prestigious to have them, so they purchase more. On the other hand, when their prices fall sharply, they buy less as they are no more prestigious goods. Third is exceptions regarding future prices. If the price of a commodity is rising and is expected to rise in future, the demand for the commodity will increase. Fourth is emergency. At times of war, famine, etc., consumers have an abnormal behavior. If they expect shortage in goods, they would buy and hoard goods even at higher prices. In depression, they will buy less at even low prices. And the last point is ignorance or quality-price relationship. Some people assume that expensive goods are of higher quality than the low-priced goods. They are fascinated with the high-priced goods from the idea of getting a superior quality. However, this may not be always true. This is the graph for the exceptions of demand, law of demand. Next is types of demand. The first is price demand. It refers to various types of quantities of goods or services which a consumer will buy at a quoted price and at a given time, considering other things remain constant. Second is income demand. It refers to various types of quantities of goods or services which a customer will buy at different stages of income, considering other things remain constant. Third, cross demand. This means that the product's demand doesn't depend on its own cost, but depends on the cost of the other related goods, which can be a substitute or a complementary good. Next, direct demand. When goods or services satisfy and individuals want directly is known as direct demand. Next, derived demand or indirect demand. The goods or services demanded or needed for manufacturing goods and satisfy the consumer directly is known as derived demand. Next is joint demand. To produce a product, there are many things that are related to each other. For example, to produce a bread, we need services like an oven, fuel, flour, etc. So the demand for the other additional things to produce a product is known as joint demand. And the last one is composite demand. A composite demand can be described when goods and services are utilized for more than one cause. Example, milk. Next is determinants of demand or factors affecting demand. The first factor is price of the product. People use price as a parameter to make decisions if all other factors remain constant or equal. According to the law of demand, this implies an increase in demand follows a reduction in price and a decrease in demand follows an increase in the price of similar goods. So there is an inverse relationship between price and the quantity demanded of the commodity. Next is income of consumers. We study the relationship of income and demand in regard to three types of goods. First is normal goods, second is inferior goods, and the third one is necessities. So in case of normal goods, rising incomes lead to rise in the number of goods demanded by a consumer. Similarly, a drop in income accompanied by reduced consumption levels. In case of inferior goods, rising incomes lead to fall in the number of goods demanded by the consumer. Similarly, a drop in income is accompanied by increased consumption levels. And last, in case of necessities, demand remains almost constant irrespective of the level of the income. For example, salt. Next is price of related goods or services. There are two types of related goods. First is complementary goods and the second one is substitute goods. Complementary goods are goods which are complementary goods, and increase in the price of one product will cause a decrease in the demand of a complementary product. Example, rise in the price of bread will reduce the demand for butter. This arises because the products are complementary in nature. Substitute goods, these are goods which are used in place of each other. In case of substitute goods, an increase in the price of one product will cause an increase in the demand for a substitute product. Example, rise in price of tea will increase the demand for coffee and decrease the demand for tea. Next factor is expectation of future. Future prices. Now expectations can be regarding future price also or future income also. So first we are going to study about future price. Consumers' current demand will increase if they expect higher future prices. Their demand will decrease if they expect lower future prices. And in case of future income, consumers' current demand will increase if they expect higher future income. Their demand will decrease if they expect lower future income. Next is size and composition of population. If the number of buyers of a commodity is huge or less, then there will be shift in demand. If the size of the market increases, like if a country's population increases or there is an increase in the number of people in a certain age group, then the demand for products would increase. Simply put, the higher the number of buyers, the higher the quantity demanded. For example, if the birth rate suddenly skyrocketed, then there would be an increase in demand for baby products. Next factor is taste and preferences. Any favorable change leads to an increase in demand and an unfavorable change leads to decrease in demand. Next topic is movement of the demand curve. Keeping all other factors the same, when there is a change in the demand of a commodity due to change in price, it is referred to as the change in quantity demanded. It is shown as a movement along the demand curve when expressed graphically. It is of two types, upward movement of demand curve or downward movement of demand curve. Upward movement of demand curve takes place when the price of the commodity increases. In this case, the quantity demanded will fall. It leads to upward movement of demand curve. It is also known as contraction of demand. When the price and vice versa, when the price of a commodity falls, the quantity demanded rises. It leads to downward movement of the demand curve. It is also known as expansion of demand. Now this is the figure which represents contraction and extension of demand. When price rises from 10 to 12, demand falls from 55 to 40. This is known as contraction of demand. When the price falls from 10 to 7, demand rises from 55 to 75. This is known as expansion of demand. Next is shift in demand curve. A shift in demand curve occurs when the whole demand curve moves to the right or left. For example, an increase in income would mean people can afford to buy more widgets even at the same price. The demand curve could shift to right for the following reasons. First, the good became more popular due to fashion changes or successful advertising. The price of substitute goods increased. The price of complementary goods decreased. Increase in income or seasonal factors. The demand curve could shift to the left for the following reasons. The price of a substitute good decreased. The price of complementary good increased. A fall in incomes, seasonal factors, or unfavorable changes in preferences. Now this is the diagram for shift. When price remains constant but demand falls from Q to Q2, this is known as decrease in demand. When the price remains constant but demand increases from Q to Q1, this is known as increase in demand. This is difference between change in demand and change in quantity demanded. First point is factors responsible for increase or decrease. In case of shift, it is increase or decrease in demand of a commodity due to the factors other than price of the commodity. In case of movements along the demand curve, it is increase or decrease in quantity demanded due to price of the commodity while keeping other factors constant. Second point is price effect. In case of change in demand, there is no price effect, that is, at the same price demand is more. In case of movement along demand curve, price effect is negative. At a lower price, demand will be more. Third point, shift of demand curve. In case of change in demand, no price effect. In case of increase in demand, demand curve shifts to the right, and in case of decrease in demand curve shifts to the left. In case of movements along the demand curve remains the same. However, in case of increase in quantity demanded, there is a downward movement, and in case of decrease in quantity demanded, there is a upward movement. Next is the diagram for the same. And the fifth point is the demand schedule. In demand schedule, we can see in case of shift of demand curve, the price of the commodity remains same, that is 10, but the quantity demanded changes. In case of movements along the demand curve, we can see that the price changes. When price increases from 10 to 15, quantity demanded decreases from 120 to 100, and when the price increases from 15 to 20, the quantity demanded decreases from 100 to 80. Thank you.